Okay, I think we are live on Facebook. Let's just try this on here. And I think we're live on Instagram as well. So, hi everyone, I'm Ben. It'll be good to see one of those classic little, yep, we can see you type posts from somebody. Hey, there we go. Thank you very much, King's Head Theatre. Oh, and look, so many people on Instagram as well. Some people I've recognised. Oh, hi, Kiki. Great. So, while let's just sort of let people wander onto the stream, I will just sort of start talking a little bit. Firstly, just to say hi, happy Wednesday, everybody. Thanks so much to the King's Head for inviting me to take part in this sort of weekly or daily during the week, I should say, streams, sort of talk about sort of different topics. Really excited to jump in and sort of just talk with you all a bit. Please ask questions as well. As interactive as possible would be amazing. I'm going to keep talking, and I'm going to keep talking for the half an hour, but please, if there's anything, I will keep track, and I will try and see sort of what's going on and try and answer any questions along the way. So this session is called Finding and Pitching a Play, and we're going to be sort of focusing that around one particular play which I did recently, which is called Jerker, which I directed at the King's Head. And I think sort of maybe the best way of introducing Jerker is to talk a little bit about myself and explain how I came to directing Jerker. So I sort of, when I was about sort of 18, 19, thought that I kind of wanted to explore theatre more, maybe thought about acting, realised very quickly acting wasn't for me, and that I sort of wanted to be a director. I studied English and art history at university whilst doing as much theatre as humanly possible, as my final grades will attest. And sort of after that, moved my way to London to try and find ways to become a director. I ended up on the King's Head Training Director Scheme, very fortunately, in 2017 to 18. And since graduating from that program, I've been freelancing as a director and stage manager around the UK. So I think it's worth sort of stressing that I am an early career director. And what I thought the session would be really good to focus on will be on the sort of things that me as an early career director learning about sort of pitching and discovering plays and how to bring those to theatre, sort of the things I wish I'd known the first time I did it. And the first time I did it was with the King's Head. So as a training director, when I did the program, we were able to pitch a show to the King's Head that we would like to direct. So that is how I sort of came round to directing Jerker in a sort of very sort of supported fashion. So I got a really brilliant opportunity to make loads of mistakes in such like a brilliantly supportive environment with the King's Head team, and therefore I'm sharing this with you so you don't make those same mistakes that I did. So strap in, hope you've got your tea and coffees ready. And so yeah, finding and pitching a play is the thing that I always consider to be sort of the more mysterious part of this, because we talk a lot about, I think directors talk a lot about their process and how they approach plays and how they direct, but they talk about the kind of the rehearsal process. And the bit that always really confused me was the bit that came before that. Like, what do we do to get to a play? So let's crack on with finding a play. Where to look? Okay, so I'll touch very briefly before I sort of talk more on Jerker and sort of where Jerker comes from about new writing. New writing is a really, I'd say, probably an easier thing to find than a play like Jerker, for the reason that those writers are out there clamoring for attention. They're looking for directors. So throw yourself out there if you're a director looking for new writing, and just go and find those writers. They're on Twitter, often with things like the Oddbit Connect, and we'll run session where there'll always be writers looking for people. You can put out posts to look for certain kinds of plays if that's your thing. So really put yourself out there, and you'll find those playwrights. There's things like the Bruntwood Prize, where you can see what people are writing, what's being recognised, and who you might be able to approach. There are scratch nights all over the place that you can sort of engage with, find writers, maybe very early, like fledgling ideas of plays that you as a director can really sort of take on and bring to greater heights. So yeah, that's kind of why I start with. I'd say that there are so many wonderfully brilliant, talented playwrights out there, and just go out and find them, please find them. And I can't wait to see plays. Then there's kind of the really old plays, the ones that sort of everyone knows about, sort of our Shakespeare's, our Middletons, Afrobains, Chekhov's, George Bernard Shaw's, what people might call the canon. So the writings that we sort of, as sort of a homogenous group, almost have decided to be great. And yes, generally when we talk about the sort of canon as it has been in history, we're talking about sort of the Staler, Paler, and Mailer side of the spectrum. And rightly, there has been sort of a lot of work done to reassess the canon and challenge it and ask who might have been forgotten, and to sort of add to that canon, widen it. Oh, hi, Adam. Nice to see you as well. And so, like, more recently, we're sort of, and again, expanding it with different viewpoints and voices. So we're seeing things like John Osborne's and Carol Churchill's and Samuel Beckett's and maybe Winsome Pinnock as well, I think, as a more contemporary playwright who is generally being considered now as a vitally important part of the canon of playwrights. As a sort of slight aside on this as well, there's a really amazing list of plays that the National Theatre have put on their website, which was the list that Kenneth Tynan collated when he was the literary director there. And it's a list of plays from the ancient Greeks through the 1960s that he considered suitable for selection by the National Theatre for its repertoire. And the National Theatre have done a really cool thing as well. They've actually highlighted and also asterisked the ones that they have put on at some point. So you can even see kind of this idea of like where there are spaces of plays that people generally consider good, but maybe haven't been put on or not been given as large a stage as people might consider that they could be given, which is kind of where we're going to be talking about, where I'm going to be talking, particularly when it comes to finding plays. This is to me, like, this is the really exciting bit. Yep, I'm a nerd. I love finding really sort of like obscure plays or plays that definitely could be given this sort of wider audience, maybe that have been lost. Maybe there's sections of them that have been lost. Maybe it's from a well-known playwright who has plays that maybe haven't been put on as much as some of their later or more celebrated works. So sort of shout out, I definitely think, to Adam and the King's Head for this, because the King's Head do a lot of amazing work with critical revivals in this regard. And I think particularly the first one that I saw when I was a training director there, and I hope many of you have seen as well, and it's sort of various sort of iterations, it's got bigger and bigger, was things like Coming Clean, which was Kevin Elliott's first play, which he wrote before later successes like My Night with Reg. But in restaging that, you can kind of look at it again and sort of see where he was coming from as a playwright. You can kind of see the development, the early voice, and there's something really exciting, I think, about rediscovering some of those works that maybe might not be seen otherwise, but are really important and definitely should be as well. So, as I said, this was a pitch that I was making as part of my sort of year as a training director at the King's Head. So I knew the theatre I was pitching for. I knew I was pitching for the King's Head. I knew the King's Head is associated with opera, with new writing, with critical revivals, and particularly with queer work. And I knew from the outset that I really wanted to find a piece of queer work that I could stage at the King's Head, a theatre that is known so widely for doing so much important queer work and being so important in queer history. So I knew I wanted to do that, and I knew, because I'm a nerd, that I wanted to do a critical revival, find something that hadn't been put up, but really needed to be brought back. So where do you go about finding one of these sort of mysterious plays? And it can be really hard. The first place that I usually start is classically the internet. I know, huge reveal. So thinking about theatres and their past productions, looking through their archives that they have online. There are so many theatres that do this. The Bush Theatre, keep them on there. I know that the Royal Court do it as well. There are websites as well where people collate these things too. And they're very easily Googleable, very easy to find. So have a look through, see what's there. Hello, Skippy Top. Yes, LGBT plays. Is that a question about where to find them, or a question about the King's Head's importance in doing them? Because yes, the King's Head is very important with those, and we will talk a little bit more about some of those in a second. Next up, actually as well, like Wikipedia is really useful for this. There are sort of so many little sort of tiny little articles out there, little sort of snippets, little bits and pieces out there that when I'm looking for something, when I'm trying to find inspiration, I'll dive myself into a hole and I'll just keep digging through there, seeing what I can find. In similarly, Google Books, there'll be tiny little academic half references, little lines, little mentions of something, and that'll just spark something and make me really want to sort of dig in and find it. And I just say go crazy. Like, there is so much out there. There are so many sort of footnotes to history out there that are worth digging into and seeing what's there. If nothing else, what you're going to end up with is this huge body of knowledge when it comes to the actual play that you do eventually put on, in terms of where it fits in terms of sort of other similar types of plays. As well, I mean, there, in terms of like, once you're off the internet looking for books, Amazon, huge, yes, obviously. Things like Abe Books as well, sort of collates lots of different sort of secondhand stores. If you're very anti-Amazon, don't want to use either of those, good for you. Things like Better World Books or the Book Depository, actually going to physical secondhand bookstores and just sort of just dig through and see what's there. I've got a prop because we're talking about the theatre, so here's one I found earlier, which is Off-Broadway Plays 2, which looks to have actually never been read. And in it, you can sort of see we've got some plays by Sam Shepard, Terence McNally, who hopefully you'll recognise those two playwrights as sort of fairly iconic, well-known playwrights. But then also Emmanuel Peluso and Mike Weller, who I'd never heard of when I bought this book. Apologies if they're watching. So I think it's kind of worth just thinking, like, just dig out there and find these sorts of plays. And this one was a book that was published in 1972, and I've got the kind of little ticket there to prove it. And I think there's something really amazing about digging into that history and finding sort of books with that past as well. You're really sort of connecting with something within that, I think. Right, why have I listed all these? Because this is exactly what I did when I found Jerka. I trawled through all of this. I started on the internet, started digging, started buying all sorts of books that I could find, anything that I thought would have some sort of like interesting queer work that I could bring to the King's Head. And I found a problem very quickly, which was that my scope was too huge. So what I had to do was sort of end up limiting myself and limiting this search. I knew I had a financial consideration when it came to pitching a play, and so I decided that my play would have 2 actors in it maximum, maybe 3 if I could find a really, really good play that justified that. And sort of that artificial restriction really, really helped me in terms of sort of focusing what I was looking for. In so doing, I then started making it quite hard for myself because I don't know if anybody watching has sort of tried to find sort of older queer work, but so much queer work is produced by, was produced by large collaborative groups, so things like Gay Sweatshop, who worked with on This Island's Mine, which was also actually recently revived at the King's Head, did sort of, they're very large in scope, they've got huge casts, and so reviving that on a budget is going to be very, very difficult. And actually, in my frustration, I ended up just typing in 2 Handa gay plays into Google, and this tiny little reference actually mentioned a writer called Robert Chesney who wrote a play called Jerking. Actually, it does turn out to be Jerker by Robert Chesley, but I think that sort of leads into as well, like some of these things, the archive process, the way that it's recorded is difficult, confusing, and sometimes mistakes are made. So really kind of like just be prepared to like dig around and just see what's going on around sort of these little phrases and words, because there can be something hiding in there that might not appear at first sight, because looking for Robert Chesney, all I started coming up with lots and lots and lots of videos of I Am the One and Only. So thanks, Chesney Hawks. But what then do you do once you sort of found this? I ended up finding this Robert Chesley book. I had to wait a month for it to arrive in the post, which shocked my millennial sensibilities to its very core. But when it did arrive, I'm reading it. So now we're going to do on the next stage of like finding and pitching a play, which is reading a play. Oh, we've got some little things coming up here. Yes, so much of theatre history seems to be gay history, Coward Rattigan, etc. Yes, that is very true, Skippy Top. There are a lot of notable writers who were gay. I think as well, though, it's worth thinking with some of those that whether they could have been out as writers. And so now you're looking at revivals like the Old Vic's recent one with Andrew Scott, which sort of changed the play and made it more overtly queer, which I think was a really interesting way of reviving a play and treating it with a sort of a modern sensibility, but also respecting that history and the past there. What else have we got? Oh, yes, Candice Gomez asking, how does the casting process work? Hopefully we'll be able to sort of briefly touch on that one just at the end. I'll try my best to talk quickly and get through to that. So yeah, when you're reading a play, I guess my question is, what are you reading for in a play? Its form, its dramatic questions, the world of the story, its characters, its genre, and then I'm sort of asking what interests you about that. About the play that you're reading, what of those sections, what of those sort of ideas leap out at you as something which you can do something with? For me, immediately when I read the title for Jerker, I knew that it was going to be a really interesting piece for me. The full title of Jerker is, and I hope I can say this at 1 o'clock on Facebook, is Jerker, or The Helping Hand, a pornographic elegy with redeeming social value and a hymn to the queer men of San Francisco in 20 telephone calls, many of them dirty. And as soon as I read that, well, firstly, I knew I had the summary of the play, which, was very handy for me. I just need to tell that title and people will understand what this play is about. And secondly, I was just so intrigued by that as a form, because it's a play which kind of explicitly says to me in that these two characters will never meet. Thank you very much, Skip Shop. It is a great title. So yeah, it's in the theatre where, I mean, the big thing about theatre is we have two, well, in this case, two people performing on stage live in the same room. But yet in this play, they are never going to speak to each other, which I think is a really sort of fascinating form to explore. They're on the telephone all the time as well, so they're not even monologuing out to us necessarily. They're giving all their attention to these phones. So yeah, really exciting, and actually as a director I think partly terrifying. A really exciting challenge and something really sort of to throw yourself into. When I read it, I knew that I had to stage it, because the piece itself, and if you do get a chance, please do read it, because it is incredible, and the way that it moves from the erotic to the comedic to the tragic in such a short space of time is, as far as I'm concerned, I just finished it. I knew that I had to do it, and the only thing I needed to search for now was if someone else had done it, because surely somebody had, and surely actually I'd just missed it. And thankfully, as it turned out, no one had. But we'll cover that in a bit. But I think the main point I want to take from that is, if you love it, you can do a good job with it. You can find other people who will love it too. There are going to be sort of business conversations and all that stuff later down the line, but like while we're talking about pitching, like find something you want to love and find something you want to share with people as well. So when you're reading it as well, what else might we want to talk about? Yes, it's worth sort of thinking as well about how stories can resonate with today. And I'm using resonate rather than be relevant. People sometimes say relevant, sometimes I'm going to say resonate. I'll explain that now, which is that for a play to resonate, it's going to evoke sort of images, memories, emotions. It's going to sort of connect, but maybe not explicitly in the sense that it did at the time. So we're asking, are there differences in reception that we might see today, positive or negative, how that resonates with us? So, for example, in the case of Jerka, as a play written at the height of the AIDS crisis and set in San Francisco in 1985, which is now, in theory, when I'm pitching this, going to be staged in London in 2019. We're looking at two very different times, particularly when we're talking about HIV/AIDS. When the play is written, in the world of the play, an AIDS diagnosis is a death sentence for these men. That is what ultimately makes them like terrified of going out and meeting other people, why they're on the phone rather than meeting in person. Compared to now, where these stakes are very different because people live healthy, normal lives on treatment for HIV, where once your viral load is undetectable, the virus is untransmittable. U equals U, as people say now. So the stakes are very different. Also, I'm not someone who lived through the AIDS crisis in the 80s, although many people watching the play would be. So the play falls somewhere in between history and lived experience. So we're focusing the project, we're getting ideas about sort of what the stakes are, where the history is, and what we're going to do with it. Oh, thank you very much, Archivecture. Jerka was brilliant. I'd love to see it again. So would I. I wonder if we could revive it again. That would be nice. And maybe that's an interesting point as well. If we revived it again, I think it would actually be impossible for people not to mention or think about coronavirus now. I've done it. Oh no, a theatre stream talking about coronavirus. But I think it is worth thinking about sort of how what happens now will change how people think about the play. Equally, these two people on a telephone had sort of really strong links with actually like sort of modern dating, because it was two people who weren't speaking to each other face to face and could be anything on the phone. So actually, when I got people to read it, we found there were strong resonances with things like online dating. So plays can change and shift, and their reception can be very different as we kind of revive them again and again and again. And that's why I think putting something like Jerka back up was really important. Okay. Yeah, as I mentioned, cast size can be really difficult when we're talking about plays. Rights as well. It's always worth seeing where these rights are, who owns them, if it's going to be possible to stage this play. I mean, it's probably that. Are they available yet? Sorry. Let's move on. Yeah, so other sort of restrictions, different things, like in Jerka, there is a third man who's with Bert for 1 second on stage. You might have been able to do this previously, but for the King's Head, in terms of paying all of our actors, having someone appear on stage for 1 second is not practical for the show. So what can I do as a director to deal with that? How can I troubleshoot this? I've read the play. I love it. What do I do with it? Now I start asking my friends. I start giving the play out to them. I start asking what they think. I get some readings done. I get people. I want to hear it. I want to time it. I want to see what I've got here and what I'm going to do with it, and what other people think I can do with it. For this, I mean, flatmates are great. Cook them dinner, ask their thoughts, get some friends over, buy them a coffee, really see what people think about and what they feed back to you, because this is where we start preparing for our pitch. Start researching a bit more as well. As I said, when was it last performed? If it was, and where, if it was. Do you have a premiere or sort of a first revival on your hands? How was it received? And why was it received in that way? Ask those questions, start going to places like, for me, I love the V&A archive. It's in Blythe House in West Kensington. Anyone can go there. You just get sort of a reader's card and you can just go in and look at everything they've got in there. And there's a whole drawer of like Hamlet skulls there too, which is incredible. Just dig around about the play. What I actually found out was that no one knew when this play had been pitched, or had been put up. There were 5 different dates floating around on the internet. It turns out that people got the names of playwrights wrong. Playwrights, actors, everything. So in digging around for this, I rediscovered the history of this play for myself and for the cast, and that really helped to sort of focus the piece. Another tip, type it out. Type out the script again. I know it might sound a little bit insane, but Ben, I've already got the script in front of me. Like, why would I write it out again? It's a great way to get familiar with the writer, what they're asking of you. It makes it easier to make changes when you're sort of giving the script out to actors. Like, I always remove the stage directions, particularly because in my version, the stage directions had notes from the original performance in them, and it helps for me figure out the runtime, because I know that when I type it out, one page is going to be about 90 seconds. So I knew then that the play is going to run at 75 minutes. I started finding plays that were similar. I started finding things like Larry Kramer's The Normal Heart, William Hoffman's As Is, Tony Kushner's Angels in America, reading them and thinking, where does this play sit in comparison to them? I then started finding things like Robert Chesley would actually argue with Larry Kramer in newspapers about how they were reflecting gay life. And that sort of brings on to so for me, the key point was a celebration of gay life. And as Bert says in the play, it was living and it was loving. That really focused my sort of pitch for the play and sort of made me know what I wanted to put up. When you started finding out the history, for Jerker, the play was censored. Firstly by the FCC in 1986, when excerpts were broadcast. Later, when Stephen Daldry directed it at the Gate Theatre in the UK, this was against the backdrop of sort of Section 28, which was the legislation banning the promotion of homosexuality. So this play has always stood against censorship, which worked really well for the King's Head as a theatre that has always sort of pushed the envelope as to kind of what can be staged, what should be staged, and really sort of fought for gay rights in what it has staged. So I knew this play was sort of fitting into this sort of conversation. I knew the venue that it was fitting into was perfect for that conversation. And I knew from my reading of both the playwright and actually the original director, Michael Cairns' writing, that they wanted to see this conversation carried on. Theatre's always a conversational medium. And what I loved about this play was how that conversation could be carried on not only in the room, but between generations that were then seeing and staging this play as well. So I've talked a lot about sort of the research point, and I think that's because when you come to pitching to the theatre, if you've done this work, this next bit is easy, in theory. You're talking about why this play, why you, why now, and why that venue. So again, firstly, make sure it's the right kind of theatre. Don't pitch this old play to a new writing venue if they only do new writing. It's never going to go very well. I knew this play was perfect for the King's Head. So I had to speak to an artist director, in this case, Adam, who's very kindly said the discovery of this play was revelatory. Oh, and I'm the perfect person to give the session. Thanks, Adam. Every artistic director is going to be different, but just be really clear about your vision for the play and about your openness, the openness about yourself as well. Like, I'm not a gay man. I didn't live through the AIDS epidemic. It is important for me to know that and acknowledge that when it comes to pitching the play, because I am going to do my homework. I'm going to know everything about this, and I'm going to represent it in a way that reflects me, and also that story and that history, and respects it. And I think reassuring artistic directors about that is vital. So the play is about 2 men being really open about themselves, their sexuality and their anxieties. I'm an individual who is more than a little bit obsessive. Hi, all directors. Likes everything planned out and is I sometimes struggle with being open about myself. And for me, this play was about exploring my own insecurities about intimacy as well. It was really important for me to do that, and I think realizing that as the process went on made me think about like being more honest with myself earlier could have really helped maybe how I'd had those first discussions, because I did make some mistakes about sort of wanting to sort of hold things too close to my chest, or maybe not being as confident about my vision for the play, because ultimately my vision for the play was what I was pitching to an artistic director. I went in with several ideas about what it could be, what it might be, when really, actually, when it came to the conversation as it went along with Adam and I sort of talked about it more, we knew what I wanted. We knew what would be best for the show. We knew how best to serve the show. And I think just having that confidence in that, if you know the play, you will know what you want to do with it. So just believe in that and believe in yourself. You're probably right. For me as well, it was music. It was the song Sex Over the Phone by the Village People just gave me that vision. It gave me that, once I knew I had that song, I knew I had my setting, I was going to create the mood, I was going to create the sense of fun that I needed, the sense of time and sort of era. I knew everything would fall into place once I had that sort of image and the moment that I ended up putting at the start of the show. Once the show is accepted by a theatre, you're then on to sort of other sort of areas by pitching it to designers, pitching it to the public. But I think once you really know why you want to do this show, and everything about the show, you can start drawing that out and realizing what you can put out to people. We're going to come up to the end of the half an hour now. So I know we had a question very briefly about casting. This was a difficult play to cast because it is a play that is very open about sexuality and intimacy. And again, I think, just to add one quick note on it, it was about being very clear and open from the start about that. And knowing that I knew I could answer questions about the piece. I knew I could answer questions about where it comes from. I know I could support that process. And I think that, for me, gave me that confidence as I went into casting. I'll finish with an idea of a timeline as well about this, which is that I found Jerka in November of 2018. After sort of reading it, planning it, I pitched it sort of around the end of February. It was programmed in March 2019. I had a creative team by August. It was cast in September. Rehearsals were in October, and the performances were in sort of October, November of 2019. So essentially, it took me 1 year from start to finish, if a timeline helps people there. And then I just finish off by saying thank you so much to Michelle Barnett, who was invaluable at supporting me as the producer for the project and really sort of helped draw out my vision for the show. Thank you so much to Adam Spreadbury-Marr, who really encouraged me to find the play, supported me through it, and really helped push me to create my vision for it, and gave me a lot of confidence going forward about how I would do it again. Thanks as well to Ting Ying Dong, who's our sound designer for the show, Clancy Flynn, who did lighting, Lee Newby, who did the design, and Enrique Ortuno and Yerrit Dor, who were my intimacy directors for the piece. Like, once I was sort of pitching and working with them, that pitch evolved and became something really, really beautiful in the hands of Tom Joyner and Tibu Fortes, who were the eventual sort of cast members that we had. And yeah, so I think discovering and pitching a play, it all comes down to that sort of that homework, that discovering why you want to do something, why it's important, and it's the framework and the building blocks that really kind of bring that play to life and bring that play back to life again. Thank you, James Austin Fitness. Yes, hopefully there will be another chance to see the play at some point. It's a beautiful piece. I'm so glad I was able to bring it back. Thank you so much to the King's Head. Unless there are any more questions popping up now, I'm going to call that a day there and say thank you so much for joining and listening, and have a great rest of your week. Do check out more of these sessions. They are on at 1 o'clock every day. And as well, I know the King's Head are doing a big fundraising program as well to try and keep themselves alive in this really difficult time. So if you do have some money, if you are able to give it to them, do help them out. Their work is invaluable for creatives like myself, and plays like Jerka that would not get a chance to come back to life otherwise. Skippy Top, would it work as an online piece? Who knows? I'd love to find out. Let's see. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and have a great rest of your day. And now I'm going to work out how to turn all these things off.